Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. Welcome back, guys. I'm back with Claudine, and today we are talking about the choir wall in Notre Dame.
Yeah, so we have been talking about Notre Dame endlessly, of course. But inside, this is another one, kind of almost one that you could take with you inside the cathedral. And we've been talking about the inside last week of the choir, where the vow of Louis XIII is. And this is part of the wall that's on the outside. And if you've been there before, you've definitely noticed it because it is covered with amazing sculptures, and I'm going to tell you the story about it and what each of them mean.
Well, I'm excited to take this podcast with me inside and listen to it while I look.
Yeah, and it has been very busy there these days, and it's definitely packed some patience. The best way to go is first thing in the morning. You don't have to worry about tickets that early, but it's even by about 10 o'clock in the morning, 9:30, 10, it starts to get very, very busy. And they've installed a new, I call it the cattle prodding, because it's this endless serpentine of fences that you wind around and around and around and around just to try to get inside the church. So it takes, you could definitely get your steps in just trying to get inside. But it's when I've been leaving there some days, even around 11-ish, the line is insane.
Wow, that's good to know. Yeah, people are here.
Yeah, people are here, spring break in March. I think it's just going to be even more so in the summer. So if you're coming here at all this year, I just get there early in the week. It opens at 7:45 and on the weekends at 8:15. So get there as close to that time as you possibly can for the best experience.
That is great advice. And a good advice too is go to mass, because you're in a different line if you go to mass.
Yeah, but lately they've gotten rid of that.
Ah, boo, that was such a great thing to use.
I know. I think they probably figured out some people were playing the cheating the system, but lately I haven't seen the mass only line. But that seems really strange to me because that was always a thing from the beginning, that they were going to have this separate, if you were coming just to pray or to mass, you would not have to wait in that line.
Maybe you just walk up and tell them.
Yeah, I'm going to test it out.
Good plan.
But I'm going to tell you about these walls. And so they're pretty amazing. When you go into the cathedral and you're past the transept, which is the center part of the church, which is where the altar is, you go right past that. You'll go up like 3 little steps and you'll look on your right side. And on the right side is this beautiful wall. That's the choir wall. It is all sculpted. And the north side dates to the 14th century and was done by Pierre du Chaillet. He was an architect and also a sculptor. He did this he started doing this at the very end of the 13th century. He started working on this. It's all multicolored, and it has a high wall that enclosed the whole entire screen of the whole back of the choir. And if last week we talked about how the choir is the most sacred part of the church, it is where, they say this is where the body of the host is, the piece that actually represents Christ that they use for the Eucharist. And then this is also where the bishops and the archbishops would go back there And it's the part of the church you cannot go in there. You can't just roam around in there. It's completely closed off. It used to be open for morning mass before the fire, but now there's just more people, so they don't use that. I don't know if they will eventually use that again. But I'm guessing for the next year or so they probably will not be. But these amazing sculptures go across. And it was the choir itself was consecrated in 1182. The low wall enclosed the space and was reserved for the clergy. And it was where, they do the Eucharist, as I said. And at the far end of it, behind the altar, is where the Jubei screen was. And the Jubei screen was installed. It was started to be worked on in the 13th century. And it was the story of the Passion of the Christ. And so that also feeds into the wall that we're going to see. So on the north wall, it is the entire life on the north and the south is the life of Christ, and it also fits in a little bit with the way that they've changed the visitation of the church. So you come in on the north side when we've talked about the chapels of the nave, and it's about the path of promise, and so it's the Old Testament. So the first chapel was Noah, and that's of the second creation, and it goes around. Then you get to the back, and this is where the choir screen comes in, and it is the life of Christ. The first sculpture that used to be there that's no longer there it was taken down when they made the lateral passage of the choir, but it was of the Annunciation. The Annunciation is when Archangel Gabriel came to Mary and said, you are with child, which happens to be is celebrated tomorrow, March 25th. But that was actually removed. So the first image you see is it's supposed to be Mary, who's now pregnant with Jesus. She visits her cousin Elizabeth, who's herself pregnant. This was in the Bible in John or in Luke 1:39 through 56, and it's where she visits her cousin, and she's standing there, Mary's standing there, she's wearing blue with gold embroidery on it, and she has a light veil on her head. Elizabeth is next to her. She's in red, and she reaches out to touch Mary. This is also sometimes called the Magnificent. But you will see the blue a lot, and a blue is what you see in Catholic churches as well, because it is the color of the Virgin. So that's why there's blue everywhere.
I always wondered about that.
It is also at the time ultramarine and lapis lazuli, the color blue. That they, would actually use lapis lazuli, actual stones that they'd grind up to make into paint was also one of the most expensive paints at that time. So it was, it was their low key bragging of their wealth if they used that color. The next piece, and there's 14 on the north side. And they really, when you look at them, you could kind of see how it is separates what each one is, but there really isn't a marking separating the scenes. But the second is the announcement to the shepherds by the angel of the nativity of the Messiah. It's from Luke 2:8 through 14, and you see the mountain behind above Bethlehem, and there's an angel in the sky and saying Alleluia, and two shepherds look up to the sky and say, to you is born on this day in the city of David a Savior. The next one is the Nativity. And the nativity, we're all used to seeing those in churches and Christmas time. And usually, it's say he was born in a manger and he was turned away from all these places. But the one here, it kind of looks pretty fancy. Like maybe it's more, the Ritz of the time. She's laying there in an actual bed, and she has this beautiful cloth on her. And then the baby is above her in a basket. And then there's two animals kind of looking down onto it, while Joseph stands there. But it's a little fancier than what's usually depicted of, in the manger.
Yeah, I like that bragging rights with the color blue.
Yeah, it's got the blue in there. The next one, and this is where I actually learned something really interesting when I was doing research on all of these. It's the Adoration of the Magi, that was guided by the stars, and it's Matthew 2, 1 through 11. And this is a very, everybody knows the three kings, the Epiphany. Here in France, we really know the Epiphany because we have that fantastic pastry we get with it. But this is supposed to be, the 12 days after Christmas, and the Magi, or the three kings, depending on what story story you see, is they come, to see the Virgin. But what I learned is that they're always depicted as three different ages. There's the oldest, an adult male, and then a young man. And it's always the oldest presenting first to the baby and to Mary,
I've
which
never noticed that in all the time I've been looking at that stuff.
no, and so now it's like there's a million paintings in the Louvre of it, and not as many in the Grand Gallery. You kind of have to go over to the Sully and the Richelieu wing. But now I'm going to go through and look at all of them, and the ones I've seen so far, it does ring true. So the oldest is, also the wisest. So the three wise men have come to prostrate themselves before the child sitting on his mother's lap, and Joseph standing behind. But as I said, the first king's the oldest and the wisest. He places his crown at Mary's feet and offers a cup filled with gold. The next is a matured man who's pointing up at the star that guided him there. And last is a young man, and he has his hand on his heart, and he's kind of looking up, saying, represents faith, hope, and charity. But he wears a fleur-de-lis crown of the kings of France. So that's another little way to kind of put the kings back into there. But that's actually, when I found that out, I was like, that is actually amazing. And now I'm looking at that fact in every time I see the Magi or the three kings.
Where do you learn this stuff? It's crazy.
I have an old book where I have so many books about Notre Dame, and most of the best things I use to find the most interesting information is the older the book, the better. Because the older the book, they just basically put so much information in it. And over time, and especially now, now it'll just say, the wall on the left is the life of Christ, and then it just moves on. So the older the book, the more information you get. So I have a book that was actually from 1860 that I found that in.
I love that. You got all the info.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating. I love it. The next one is the one where I've had people actually send me this picture and say, "What is happening here?" It's called the Massacre of the Innocents by the order of King Herod. King Herod feared his power of Judea was threatened and ordered the killing of all male children under 2 years of age in Bethlehem. He's depicted sitting on a throne with his scepter, and there's a devil behind him, like, whispering in his ear, like, this is what you're supposed to do. Um, and there's somebody holding up a baby, like ready to stab it. It is pretty, it is a kind of a gruesome scene. But the next one is the flight from Egypt, and it's because Joseph had a dream that Herod was going to try to kill Jesus, the baby, and they decided to flee. So he takes Jesus and Mary, puts her on a donkey, walks her through to get to Egypt. On the right, the Holy Family is walking of the image. And then there's a little kind of looks like a little, hut almost on a stand. And there's two statues in there. And the two statues are like toppling over. And it's supposed to be kind of like the false gods of Egypt are falling because Christ is coming over there.
And now we know why.
I learned a lot about the life of Christ in this. And I'm not, I wasn't raised Catholic. I sometimes have clients that are very Catholic, and I'll actually ask them questions like, "Hey, what is it? What do you know about this?"
Now you can teach Bible study.
Now I'm going to teach Bible study. The next one is a presentation in the temple. And this one's kind of funny because in this one, Jesus is presented to the God as the law requires every firstborn child to be done. There's two prophets, Simeon and Anna, welcome him and sing, "My eyes have seen salvation." And Simeon is this pious man, clothed like with the Holy Spirit, and he recognizes this Savior that's come to him. And then in the back, Anna holds a basket of doves that they're going to offer as a sacrifice, which is nice, lovely. And the next one is the one I think is kind of funny because it's Jesus among the teachers at the temple. This was his first pilgrimage. He was just 12 years old. He goes to the temple and he teaches these older men what is going to be kind of stories of the Old Testament. But Mary stands behind him And in the image of it, he looks like he's more like, 2 years old, but he's supposed to be 12. And the next one is this baptism. And this is another one that's kind of interesting because he's standing there and he's around what it looks like he's wearing a skirt, but it's supposed to represent the water because he's being baptized by John the Baptist is next to him. And then there's an angel next to him holding his garment. But it is kind of funny. But again, the Virgin's there. She's depicted in blue, of course. Then next one, the tenth sculpture is the Wedding Feast of Cana, which is a massive painting that you will find in Notre Dame, or I'm sorry, in the Louvre. But it's Mary's presence there with Jesus, and he's sitting there, and it's just Mary, Jesus, and another couple. The table is covered with a golden tablecloth, and with these four figures, Jesus and Mary have halos behind their head, and the other couple are there, and the man wears a halo, but the woman doesn't. How mean! But they have two jars at the feet, and the servant is looking and presenting this jar because the wedding feast of Cana is the first miracle, is when he turned water into wine, or what I call the greatest of all the miracles.
I love the greatest of all the miracles. And why do we
Yeah.
have to sacrifice doves? Leave them alone.
I know, leave them alone. But the man is sitting at the table holding bread, so it's also kind of a precursor to the Eucharist because you've got the blood and the wine that represents the blood and then the bread. The next one is the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem on a donkey, and it's a few days before the Passion. Jesus is on a donkey as he heads towards Jerusalem. He's followed by some of his disciples, and a man appears wearing holding a red garment, laying it down kind of as a carpet. And there's a building behind, just kind of a door, and that represents Jerusalem. And then the 12th one is representing that there's the Last Supper. So there's the 12 disciples are seated around Christ for the Feast of Passover. And Jesus gives them the bread and the wine that represents his body. And he announces that night that somebody will betray him. And then John, who's always the beardless apostle. So when you look at these, even if you don't know a lot of stuff from the Bible, even if you're in Saint Chapelle and in Saint Chapelle upstairs, there's all the apostles that look down. The one that never has a beard is always John. So
I
that's another,
learned something new today.
yeah. That and the kings, learned about the kings. But and this is Judas. And what's funny is because I had a client recently said, it's funny because some of the stuff that you have in a Catholic church in France is different from the US, like especially the saints. And one of the ones we'll talk about next week, it's like we don't ever hear anything about this saint. But in France, because there's different saints, and most of them are European and Orient, and they're like, oh, we were always about Judas. It was Judas, 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 because they were trying to scare you. And I was like, actually, I rarely ever even come across even the name Judas when it comes to anything in the churches of Paris.
That's true. I don't ever see that.
So this is and Judas isn't depicted. I mean, they don't pinpoint who he is in this. The next one is the washing of the feet of Jean. Jesus kneels down and washes the feet of Peter. Oh, sorry, it's of Peter, but it's in John the 13th. He holds a scripture that Jesus has entrusted him to. And Peter is, of course, going to become the first pope. So he is the pope and the first in Rome. And the sculptor want to connect the scenes with the Last Supper that both foretell the Passion. And then the last one on this side is Christ in the Gardens of Olives. And Jesus is on his hands and knees, and he's praying to his Father before his arrest. Some of the disciples are behind him asleep. And after this Passover meal, Jesus is going to then go out there because he knows what is coming. And so he says, Father, if you're willing, remove this cup from me. And so then the next thing comes the Passion. And the story originally would have gone around to the front, which is in front of the altar, because the Jubei screen that once crossed the altar had the story of the Passion. That, of course, that was created right before these walls were. That was created in the 13th century. earlier in the mid 13th century, and it was taken down and restored, just completely destroyed in the 18th century. And that is what they found underneath the transept. When they opened it up during the restoration, they found 1,600 pieces of that. They probably would have found more if they had more time to look, but all of those have been taken out and cleaned. They recently had that exhibit at the Cluny we talked about, and that just closed a few weeks ago. But they are cleaning all of them, and then they're even 3D imaging them, because what they're going to do is they're going to do, for the first time ever, we'll get a 3D image of what that probably looked like, which is going to be amazing.
Oh, I can't wait to see that. When will we get that?
Yeah, it's going to be probably a while, but it would then, so you'd kind of go around, and then you'd go around the front, and you'd see all the parts of the Passion, which is also, you'll have the Stations of the Cross that are in all the churches. And so you have that story. And then it goes around to the south wall. The south side, when Pierre de Chalais died in 1318, Jean Ravi continued the project, and then eventually Jean de Bautier. They were both architects and sculptors. And so they worked on this side in the 14th century. And it does look a little different. The 14th century above it kind of has these little polychromy arches, very Gothic looking arches, when the north side is very straight architectural, looks more like a citadel wall. And so the south side has a little bit more flourish on the top. And then each section, each of the nine sections is separated by kind of a column. And so it is just a little bit different, but it still creates that same, the fabric that they use, the color and the painting of the fabric kind of keeps going. So now on the first one, it's now after Christ has been killed. And the first one is the risen Christ appears to Mary Magdalene. It's dawn or Easter morning, and Mary has arrived at the tomb, and sees a man that is a gardener, and she doesn't recognize who it is, which is also, he's got blood on his chest, and he's got the stigmata. He's got the, holes in his hands and his feet. And it's the one of those right hand that's even depicted in this. And he asks her, "Who are you looking for?" And then he calls her by her name. And then that's when she realizes that Christ is alive. He's holding a shovel, so he's really pretending, he really is full in on pretending to be a gardener. And behind him is a tree that is full of fruit. So that's kind of evokes paradise. But that's the first one. The next one is now Christ has appeared to the holy women, come back to the empty tomb. So according to the gospel, it was the women in his life that went to find him, and they were the first ones to see him and talk to him. They were overwhelmed by the news of the resurrection and came there. He's holding a white banner that's topped with the cross of glory, which is a sign of victory over death and sin. And also John Paul II, as they had transformed the papal crozier to kind of have that same kind of cross. So they evoked it many, many, many years later.
Evoking all the time.
Evoking. Yeah. The third one is Christ appears to Simon, Peter, and John. And of course, you just have to wonder, if you just look at this from the outside, like, wait a minute. So I thought you were dead. I thought I saw you die. But Peter's tossed himself at the feet of Jesus, because he was the one who really regrets the denial during the Passion, and he's back to his faithfulness. And John is there accompanying Jesus at the foot of the cross. And Jesus speaks with Peter and forgives him of all of his sin. The fourth is he appears to more disciples. They recognize him after they sit down and have dinner with him and break bread. And he blesses and breaks the bread. And this is also kind of part of where the meal takes place, and breaks the bread, like the Eucharist at Mass. The next one is Christ appearing to the apostles. So it's the night of Easter. So this is all happening in a day. It's a busy day. On the night of Easter, Jesus is with the apostles, and the scene tries to depict the physical reality of Jesus's resurrection. And then the next one is he's appearing now to more of the apostles and to Thomas, who was the doubting the one of of the resurrection. And Thomas is also, side note, the patron saint of architects, and he is the one that Viollet-le-Duc turned him, the statue of Thomas, into the face of Viollet-le-Duc. He kneels before Jesus, who shows him his wound, and he tells him to touch his wound. So that's where he believes it. And that, if you think about that scene, and you think about a painting that's in the Louvre of Napoleon, when it's in the same room as the Delacroix, and there's in this painting, Napoleon is touching the wound of a sick person, most likely a leopard, and everybody's like, no, no, don't do that. But Napoleon specifically wanted it to be in that pose because it also takes you back, gives you back to that image of a very famous image of the story of Christ,
I
because
feel like
that's
I am gonna know so much about the Bible now.
I know so much. I more than I ever th I did go to private school till like eighth grade. I really remember like I don't know Noah and a few other things, and that was about it. So it's really jogging my memory here. The next one is kind of a double story, and it's the reunion of Jesus. They're on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. It's the appearance of Christ, and they are there, and it's a miraculous catch. So they have the fish in the net symbolizes the believers gathered in the church. So they're out there fishing. Peter, who had denied Christ, has now humbly confessed his love to him. And he entrusts the church to him, of course, and that's when he become, he's then later the first pope. The next one is now he's appeared to the apostles and again in Galilee. And he finds himself in the midst of all of them. And the last two scenes depict a mission of the 11 apostles gathered around Jesus. They go that he's telling them he's holding a book. So you see Jesus holding a book, and this is supposed to be kind of showing you that this is, going to eventually be the gospel. And he's telling his apostles, go out into the world, and speak of the stories and speak of my name. And the not last one is pretty similar to the one before it. He's appearing to the same people at the Mount of Olives, and this is before his ascension. And on the right of the scene, a table is set for the last shared meal. After this last meal, that Jesus disappears, and there's no medieval representation of the ascension at Notre Dame, so it just kind of ends there. And so you go through on this side, and then as you walk out the church, it's of follows. It's basically the saints that have a tie to Paris. Of these walls in the 19th century, under Viollet-le-Duc, he had all the colors restored. There was a restoration of these choir walls in the 1990s, and I was actually trying to find an actual date, but I haven't come across one. But I know that was in the 1990s. And the night of the fire, because this was on the outside of the choir, there was, of course, some water did get on them, but the restorer said that really all they had to do was dust and clean them, and they, didn't have to do a whole lot of work to restore it and fix any of the pieces on it. So it's another one of those things that's kind of miraculous that it happened. But when you look at these walls, it's very busy, and so what I did, so I could put it on my website in my newsletter, I took a picture of each section and then looked at it on my computer. And then you can really see the details because you can't get very close to these as well. They do have it kind of roped off. But they're gorgeous, like the painting and the gold behind it. And then just the other day when I was in there, in one of the first ones of the south section, Christ is holding this crozier with a little cross on the front. And because the way the light was, it put a shadow of the cross on the back of the gold, and it just was so beautiful how it was done. So definitely go in there and really look at them. Don't just take it in as a whole. Try to stop and look at each one of them because they really are so beautifully done.
Yeah, you're making me want to wait in that crazy line and go see it again.
Just go in the morning.
Definitely a good recommendation. And you can
Yeah.
also go with Claudine if you guys want.
There you go. You can listen to me talk for hours.
Or just bring this podcast with you.
There you go.
Well, guys, tune in next week and follow Claudine Hemingway at claudinehemingway.com. And please let us know if there's anything else you want to learn. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, claudinehemingway.com.